Good morning. I'm Barry with preparedness.com. It's early here, so please bear with the fact that it's semi-dark. If you're new here, subscribe, ring the little bell icon. If you're not new here, you know what to do. Share the show with somebody you love, and please make sure that you have not been unsubscribed by the YouTube algorithmic robots, and please consider resubscribing. Bear Independent Brief, 26 April 23. In 2022, the world's nations spent more money on their militaries than ever before, to the tune of $2,240 billion. That's $2,240 billion. Of course, ever at the forefront of military spending is the United States, which spent a whopping $877 billion. That makes up almost 40% of the total military spending around the world. Still, the rate of increasing investment into militaries around the world is the most potent indicator of the current global situation. Europe has seen its military spending rise at its fastest rate in 30 years, and the United Nations, China, and Russia make up three other major spenders. Although I believe that's supposed to be the UK. China and Russia make up three other major spenders. Occasionally you get a typo. It happens. One source noted that Europe's spending increased by 13%, not including inflation. This means that even after considering inflation, thank you, global elitists, the spending truly has significantly spiked, and tensions stemming from Russia, Ukraine, and China are a definitive driving factor for the increases. Now, in NATO, one of the major gripes that President Donald Trump had against other NATO members was that NATO spending on defense is supposed to be at 2% of GDP, gross domestic product, and the vast majority of nations in NATO were not spending 2% on defense. 2%. Think about that. 2% of your annual budget. If you earn $50,000 a year, that's $1,000 per year for training, ammunition, equipment upgrades, etc. Up before my alarm clock this morning. 2% is not that big of a deal, especially when you think a fight, expect a fight on the horizon. So I understand the complaints by former President Donald J. Trump that these other NATO nations are not pulling their weight, spending their fair share when it comes to defense spending. Now we have this special military operation in Ukraine. We have China flying more and more sorties over and around Taiwan. We have the People's Liberation Army Navy, the plan, which is how you know it's Chinese, because that's a ridiculous name. Pleased to make for best navy for you for invade semiconductor island for best global economy. The People's Liberation Army Navy. Show of force, maritime exercises in around the South China Sea, Taiwan, etc. So other nations are looking around and going, it could get a little froggy around here. We might want to have some, beans, bullets, band-aids set back. So as always, take the macro indicator and boil it down to the micro. If nations around the world, large nations around the world, are spending on defense, what might we be concerned about? Defense, perhaps. Of course, it's also a macro geopolitical indicator that the likelihood of war increases day over day. All things are possible, but not all things are probable. I believe the probability of there being a large-scale, potentially World War III level war is increasing. War is diplomacy by another means. Yeah. Nan Tian of the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute said the increase, quote, was driven by the war in Ukraine, driving European spending upwards, but also the unresolved and worsening tensions in East Asia between the U.S. and China, end quote. If you combine the spending of both the U.S. and China, it would make up half of all military spending worldwide. The countries that have grown their militaries the most aggressively in the last decade include Poland, the Netherlands, and Sweden. Interesting. They're all tertiary to Ukraine and Russia. Lorenzo Saccarazzo told DW News, quote, there's definitely an increase in tensions, but whether that is going to convert into conflict remains to be seen. In other words, whether an actual conflict will erupt is uncertain, but the indicators of preparation continue to increase. The preparation for conflict. The indicators of preparation for conflict continue to increase. End quote. Again, if they're prepping for war, what do you think we ought to be doing? This week is the celebratory state visit from South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol as the 70th anniversary of the alliance between South Korea and the U.S. comes to pass. And again, the Korean War was a proxy war between China and the United States, fought in Korea. President Biden, asterisk, is expected to announce new and specific U.S. efforts to deter nuclear and cyber attacks against South Korea from North Korea. White House National Advisor Jake Sullivan kept the details under wraps, but did say, quote, the statement will send a very clear and demonstrable signal of the United States' credibility when it comes to its extended deterrence commitments, end quote. Diplos speak for, you better take us seriously because we're taking this seriously. South Korea has talked about sending, we reported in a previous brief, approximately 500,000 155 millimeter artillery shells to the United States so that the United States can turn around and send them to Ukraine, where the conflict is ongoing, to which the Russians have responded, oh, that's cute. South Korea, if you give, paraphrasing here, if you give the United States 500,000 artillery shells so they can give them to Ukraine, we'll give the North Koreans super duper scary new technological weapons and they could potentially wipe you off the face of the earth. How do you feel about that? To which the South Koreans replied, no, we were just kidding, basically. We're just kidding. Nah. Oofda. In week 3 of our 50-week preparedness initiative, we're talking about food. On Monday, we talked about bug-out bag food. Today, from a preparedness standpoint, we're talking about your pantry, your prepper pantry, and your long-term food storage, buckets and number 10 cans. You should have a pantry in your house. That pantry, depending on the size of your house and the number of people in your house, should be able to last you 2 to 4 weeks of just shelf-stable pantry food. That, and this is the key, that you know how to cook and your family will eat. I don't think as many Americans know how to cook anymore. For many people, food comes out of the window in the side of the brick building after driving past the talking computer board where you say, I'll take a number 2 extra cheese and a Coke, please. Or it comes out of a pizza box, or it comes out of a grocery store in a box in the freezer section or something like that. Not as many people cook with raw food ingredients anymore, let alone grow their own raw food ingredients anymore. And again, an indicator if international war, potentially World War III, is on the horizon. Let's look to the recent past and what happened in World War II. Liberty Gardens, remember those? Everybody had a garden in their backyard, or at least they were encouraged to. Lots of people had their own chickens because chickens produce eggs and they produce meat, right? So raw inputs to be able to cook with. But let's get back to your pantry. Your pantry in your house, whether it's a closet or a room or a section of your basement, whatever you got. should be able to last you easily 2 to 4 weeks. Now, if you live in the northern tiers where it snows half the year, this is not preparedness, this is a way of life, right? A well-stocked pantry keeps you alive. And I think that's something that we need to get back to. Then you should have what I call your prepper pantry. And this is more long-term food, potentially 6 months or so of shelf-stable long-term food. Again, it's the stuff that you eat. If your kids eat mac and cheese, you get mac and cheese. If you eat ramen, you get ramen. If you eat canned beans, you get canned beans, whatever it might be. And in the Prepper Classroom, which is a free playlist here on YouTube, I talk about food storage and what to store and how to store it and how much to store. But I also highly recommend the 7 meals plan. Figure out 7 meals that your family will eat, does eat on the regular, that you can then prepare 6 to 12 months of in your prepper pantry. A super basic example of this for us in my household is spaghetti and meat sauce. 2 pounds of spaghetti, 1 jar of sauce, boom, dinner. Okay? So if I had to have a year of that, I would need 104 pounds of spaghetti and 52 cans of sauce. The advantage of meal planning in that regard is that when spaghetti goes on sale, you can buy 104 of them. Or you can also task org in such a way that every time you go to the store, you just buy a couple extra pounds of spaghetti and a couple extra jars of sauce. And then you set those in your prepper pantry, so a little bit at a time. So if you have the resources to spend now, you meal plan, you buy everything in bulk, which allows you to recognize an economy of scale. Or you buy everything in bulk when it's on sale, or you buy a little bit at a time as your budget allows. So build up 6 to 12 months in your prepper pantry. Then you get into long-term food storage. This is your buckets. I have 50 plus videos here on how to bucket food. Use the YouTube search bar. It is the second largest search engine on planet Earth, owned by the first largest, Google, which is owned by the Alphabet Company, which is owned by the Alphabet Boys, LaCia, the company. But I digress. Your buckets. The big 4 here is corn, rice, wheat, and beans. And basically, you want to be able to have about 3,000 calories per person per day in your long-term food storage. The internationally recognized number of calories that a military-age male needs to eat to sustain operations and not lose muscle mass is 3,200 calories per day. That works out to about 2 pounds of any type of grain. They're roughly 1,600 calories per pound of any type of grain, corn, rice, wheat, or beans. 2 pounds per day. So I round that to 750 pounds per person per year, which sounds like a lot until you start buying in bulk, and then it's not a lot. You can get approximately 30 to 33 pounds per bucket. So if you got 100 pounds, you should be able to get 100 pounds into 3 buckets. Boom. And then those buckets start stacking up fast. All of those grains, they should be dry grains. All of those grains should be put in Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers, approximately 2,500 cc's of oxygen absorption per bag, per Mylar bag. Seal the Mylar bag, put it inside a bucket, hammer on a lid, a bucket lid with an O-ring in it. Good to go. I get my lids and my buckets from Uline Uniform Lima India November Echo.com. And no, they're not cheap. Nothing's cheap anymore. We are past the period of time where things are cheap and now moving into the period of time where we are blessed that they're even available. In many cases, this should have been done years ago, but in many cases, people are brand new to preparedness. So buckets, corn, rice, wheat, and beans. More details on that in the Prepper Classroom free playlist here. Go check it out. And then your number 10 cans. Number 10 cans of stuff that you eat. Beans and corn and green beans and baked beans. And hell, you can even get nacho cheese sauce in a number 10 can. Or, beef stew or chicken breast or whatever. A good resource for that is webstaurantstore.com. Is it cheap? No, nothing's cheap anymore. But you can order it in bulk and have it freight delivered to the end of your driveway if you like. And of course, you can also check out your big box stores, Costco and Sam's Club. So I recommend you check that out as well. So that's your long-term food storage. And on Friday, we'll talk about long-term food production. Because once you start eating your long-term food storage, depending on how long you think this conflict is going to go, a year might not be enough. And I don't really want to dive into all the reasons why it might not be enough, but suffice it to say, it might not be enough. So how do you produce calories to replace the ones that you're consuming out of your long-term food storage? We'll be talking about that on Friday, so be sure to tune in. Now, briefly, I want to tell y'all, this hoodie is made by Origin, Maine. There's their little logo right there, Origin, Maine, made in the United States. So is this first aid kit. It's also, similarly, made in this exact same camo pattern. This is not just a first aid kit. This is also a survival kit. And this is the Origin Western IFAC Individual First Aid Kit made by my company, Refuge Medical. So we are super happy to be partnering with Origin. Awesome company that makes everything, every stitch, every thread here in the United States of America. And we have produced this first aid and survival kit for them. So I briefly want to show you what makes this different than a bare fac, and then we'll move on with the brief because we've got two other portions of the brief I'd like to discuss this morning. So the first is, obviously, it's in this exclusive Origin Raptor camo pattern. There's two different patterns. There's the Woodland, which I'm holding, and the Highland, which is right here, which is more tan, more deserty. Both are super cool. You got your shears on the outside. You can see they've got a Velcro retention tab here holding the shears on right here. These are good trauma shears. And of course, you can see Refuge, made in the United States of America. Guaranteed forever. 72 lives saved to date. You've got a legitimate, brand new Generation 7 cat tourniquet on the outside. When you receive this, you should take it out of the plastic so that it's ready to go when you get it. Now, like all other bare first aid kits available from refugemedical.com, you pop the lid open, but this one has a Sawyer mini water filter right here in top. There's the Sawyer, there's the squeeze pouch for the Sawyer. So, you've got water purification, water filtration capability right here in the kit. So if your hunt goes long, or you're stranded, or you just need a comprehensive kit to throw in your bug out bag, you have water. Also, link is in the description. And if you follow Refuge Medical on YouTube, you will have seen a video recently of me showing you how to use all this stuff. Pull the inner out of the outer. Before we go any further, the outer nylon pouch is a double layer of nylon for durability. There's also a plastic backer, just like a frame pack, inside of here in a separate pouch inside of the outer. And what this does is helps keep the pack nice and stiff. See that? So that's in there as well. You can take that and remove that if you like, or you can leave that in there. And what's super cool that I've seen people do is take a couple of self-tapping screws and drive screws through this into the bulkhead of their vehicle or anything else to attach this pouch, which is of course MOLLE capable. It can be worn on a belt, a backpack, a war belt, a chest rig, a plate carrier, a headrest, wherever else. Tactical nylon will allow you to attach your gear to your other gear. Pop this open. You've got all your bare facts stuff. Quick clot, trauma bandage, triangle bandage, thank you, Curlix, eye shield, eye pads, 2x2, 4x4, and 5x9 gauze pads, antiseptic towelettes, etc. All down here. We've also got our backfill or our backflow syringe for our Sawyer Mini so that we can purge the Sawyer Mini so that we don't have contaminated water in our filter. We've got our trauma pack, like I said, with our eye shield and our flat duct tape and our Mylar blanket and our Curlix and our everything else. We've got Quick Clot for wound packing here. In the back of the stack, we have nasopharyngeal airway, a pair of chest seals for penetrating wounds to the pleural space rather. One is a vented, one is a non-vented. So there's two of them because typically you have an in and an out hole. You also have left and right lungs, BT dubs. A burn tech dressing for burns. Common modality of injury, in both motor vehicle accidents as well as if you're living out in the woods for a hot minute, you can get burned. Instructions for your Sawyer Mini if you don't know how to use it. Then over here on the front shingle, we've got our 6-inch emergency trauma bandage. This is like an Israeli wound dressing, just better. A pair of nitrile gloves, a roll of 1-inch duct tape, or 1-inch tape rather. The straw attachment for our Sawyer Mini, because a lot of people say, hey, what's up with the Life Straw? Why don't you like Life Straw? Because I can do this with the Sawyer if I had to, stick the straw on it, and now I have a Life Straw. I can also hook it onto this squeeze pouch, and like squeezing a roll of toothpaste, I can make clean water come out of this. I can also screw this into any water bottle, although I like the smart water bottles because they're very large and robust. So, really good filter, really good system. Our Sharpie, and then here is a fire starter kit. You got your Refuge Bic lighter, made in the United States of America, with a little long tab on it, so you can get in there to your fire better. And then this is fire starting granules. You literally dump these out and throw a spark or a flame on it, and they'll burn for 5 to 7 minutes. So we've got survival capability as well as trauma medical capability in this kit. Link is in the description. Check it out. I'll put that all together later because there's a lot of stuff in there. Now, back to the brief. From RT, which is not Refuge Training, which we'll talk about later. From Russia Today, Russian propaganda. Pentagon top brass pleased with Carlson exit, Politico. The popular former Fox News host regularly criticized the feminization of the U.S. military. I'm not here to pontificate on the virtues of Tucker Carlson, but I agree that the feminization of the U.S. military is a bad thing. However, the Pentagon feels differently. Senior Pentagon officials have welcomed the departure of Tucker Carlson from Fox News, Politico has reported. The popular host regularly criticized the U.S. military's diversity and inclusivity policies, claiming they were imposed at the expense of battle readiness. I agree with that. Quote, "We're a better country without him bagging on our military every night in front of hundreds of thousands of people," end quote, a senior Defense Department official told the news outlet on condition of anonymity. Nobody has balls anymore, right? They can't take credit for the words that they say. Oh, I'll say whatever I want as long as I'm anonymous. Sounds a lot like certain YouTube comments, doesn't it? The source claimed Carlson had made, quote, "a mockery," end quote, of free press and repeatedly, quote, "cherry-picked department policies and used them to destroy Department of Defense as an institution," end quote. Well, you do dumb shit. People are going to call you on your dumb shit. Commenting on Carlson's exit from the conservative network, another official reportedly said, quote, "good riddance," end quote. The popular former primetime host regularly accused the Pentagon of undermining U.S. fighting capabilities for the sake of ideologically motivated inclusivity imposed under pressure from President Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. *'*'''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''''' In a March 2021 segment, Carlson blasted the introduction of flight suits for pregnant aviators, suggesting that Washington was headed in the entirely wrong direction, unlike its rival, Beijing, China. Quote, "While China's military becomes more masculine as it assembles the world's largest navy," that's an asterisk, dude, that's a joke. 90% of their ships are merchant vessels that somebody put a machine gun in the bow and called it a naval ship now. But they are building more actual warships as we speak. Back to the quote. "While China's military becomes more masculine as it assembles the world's largest navy, our military needs to become, as Joe Biden says, more feminine," Carlson said. "This is a mockery of the U.S. military and its core mission, which is winning wars," end quote. I agree with that. Unfortunately, the military is a test bed for social change. What we tolerate the next generation will embrace. So be very careful about what you tolerate, because you will normalize it for the next generation underneath of you. As we're seeing with what started, and to be clear, I'm a little L libertarian. I think the Libertarian Party is filled with maybe as many scumbags as the Republican or the Democratic Party, and I think running on legalization of weed as a platform is stupid. Comma. I also firmly believe in liberty, and I'm a constitutional literalist. What does it say? Just like I'm a biblical literalist, what does it say? As a side note, it amazes me how many people say the Constitution has to be interpreted literally. What does it say? Yet are willing to cherry pick verses out of the Bible. So we put more credence into what some men said 250 years ago than what God said. And then wonder why you're not reaping the fruits of your obedience. Interesting. But I digress upon my digression. I'm a constitutional literalist. Conservative fiscally. And I don't socially care if you want to be homosexual or live your life however you want to live. You do you. Whatever you're into, as long as you're not actually bothering me, I'm cool. Biblically, I have a completely different stance on all that stuff. Your abominations piss the Father off, and your sins have created a separation in between you and the Father. But I can separate in my mind the difference between political ideology and spirituality. But we've seen this, what one generation tolerates, the next will embrace. One generation tolerated, even pushed for as a social movement, the normalization of LGBT. And now we've got QIA plus, I shit in litter boxes, minor attracted abomination people, so much so that the lesbian and gay community are pissed off as well that these people are coming in and tarnishing what they worked so hard to establish as a civil right for themselves. What one generation tolerates, the next will embrace. So tolerating weakness and inclusivity in the United States military now basically means, historically speaking, that in the future, what we have as an air quote military will be nothing more than a bunch of blue-haired crazy people with rifles that are completely unfit to perpetrate wars, win wars, anywhere in the world. Back to the article. The remarks triggered a rare direct rebuke from the Pentagon, with then spokesperson John Kirby responding, quote, "What we absolutely won't do is take personnel advice from a talk show host or the Chinese military," end quote. "We know we're the greatest military in the world today, and even for all the things we need to improve, we know exactly why that's so," Kirby insisted. When asked by Political what he thought about the reported glee at his departure from among senior Pentagon officials, Carlson replied in a text message, "Ha! I'm sure." The news that Carlson and Fox News were parting ways broke on Monday, shortly before his primetime show was due to be broadcast. Neither party has offered an explanation for the split. And that's the end of the article. However, I'm sure it has nothing to do with the coincidental $787 million defamation lawsuit that Dominion Voting Machines won against Fox News. Interesting. Which I'm sure has nothing to do with the fact that a presidential election is coming up in the relatively near term, 16, 18 months or so, and the big they, are going to have to do everything they can to push the party line that the elections are legitimate and that the process can be trusted and that this is a fair and balanced democracy, even though it's a representative republic, where everybody's voice is heard. There's nothing wrong with the voting machines. Well, I disagree completely, but apparently some judge either has his head so far stuck up his ass that they cannot rule from the bench appropriately, or they've been bought off. Probably a combination of the two. And remember, Tucker was one of the largest voices against the Dominion voting machines, and the big they, are going to need those Dominion voting machines again coming up in the near future for the next presidential election, which Robinette Biden Jr. has announced that he will be running again. If at this point anybody in good conscience pulls the lever for Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., you're a robot or brain damaged or such a deep ideologue that I'm not even sure you should be allowed to render a vote. You should probably be in a padded room somewhere, hugging yourself with a straitjacket on. But I digress. Back to international affairs. Also from RT, Xi Jinping holds phone talks with Zelensky. The call will provide a powerful boost to bilateral ties, the Ukrainian leader said. So Xi is making global efforts to paint himself as the peacemaker, to answer all of the world's problems through Chinese diplomacy and strong Chinese leadership. Even though globally, their Belt and Road initiatives are falling apart. Domestically, their economy is not doing so well. There are revolts in the streets in many places. They had to lock and weld their own people into their own apartment buildings. Not to stem the transmission of COVID. That was the line that was touted. It was so that the domestic extremists, those revolting against the centralized Chinese authority, would be locked up, therefore taken off the streets, and they could crush that little rebellion that was going on, which many have surmised is the reason for the original Wuhan lab leak in the first place. And then, Rahm Emanuel, never let a crisis go to waste. Oops, the thing is out. Let's shut down the world economy, use that to push Agenda 2030 and the World Economic Forum strategic initiatives, and maybe we'll just have the horsepower just enough to completely revolutionize the world and remove more freedom from more God-fearing people, and to usurp authority and centralize more power and more finance and more resources to the top 1% of the globe. Or, bat soup, whatever, one or the other. But anyway, Xi Jinping is having a phone call with Zelensky. President Xi Jinping of China and his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky have spoken over the phone in what is presumed to be their first conversation since Moscow launched its military operation, it's a war, in the neighboring state more than a year ago. Zelensky tweeted that the dialogue was, quote, long and meaningful, end quote. The same dude that we've given, depending on who you ask, $100 to $196 billion of taxpayer-funded military hardware to, plus billions and billions and billions of dollars in economic aid. That same guy who was installed by Lucia approximately 8 years ago, and who before that was an actor. Literally, that was his job. That guy is now having conversations with the leader of the prime enemy of the United States of America. That's not going to help the optics for the Biden administration when it comes to, hey, we got to send more money over there. It does kind of dovetail into my theory, though, that at some point, because the United States has a history of going to war with people that we arm and train, that possibly Zelensky flips and, say, China negotiates a peace treaty between Russia and Ukraine. Zelensky flips. Ukraine falls back into the fold underneath the thumb of Russia, who is quickly becoming China's largest ally. And the United States, who has been stockpiling, arms and munitions and equipment and personnel in places like Poland and Germany, now has to go in to, air quote, liberate Ukraine, which becomes the casus belli for war between the United States and Russia and China, and now Ukraine in Eastern Europe, which soon becomes a two-front war once China makes a move on Taiwan, and magically we have World War III, which, as we all know, is phenomenally good for the military-industrial complex, and accomplishes the big they's goal of destabilization to centralize authority even further, coupled with their favorite thing, depopulation. Oh, and increased taxation. Coincidence, I'm sure. Zelensky tweeted that the dialogue was, quote, long and meaningful. He said the call, along with the appointment of an ambassador to China, will, quote, give a powerful impetus to the development of our bilateral relations, end quote. Xi told Zelensky that, quote, dialogue and negotiations are the only viable way out, end quote. Now, maybe there seems to be a lot of hype on both sides of the argument about whether or not Ukraine has been able to stand up the roughly 200,000 or so personnel that they need to launch this counteroffensive that is supposed to have been taking place since the fall of 2022, but hasn't actually happened yet. 200,000 or so people being approximately 40 to 60,000 more than the initial United States push into Iraq during the global war on terror. So that's a significant number of people. Plus, there's still a lack of Ukrainian Air Force infrastructure. They have MANPADS, they have MLRS, multiple rocket launch systems. They have those things, but their Air Force, not so much. Rolling stock, they have some Bradleys, they have some Challenger 2s, but they don't have what they need to build out the alleged 8 brigades of armor that they're trying to build out right now. They just don't have the people. The Ukrainians say, oh, we totally do. But you haven't launched the counteroffensive yet. And then the Russians say they totally don't. And here's the proof. They haven't launched the counteroffensive yet. So who knows? So maybe Xi is correct that dialogue and negotiations are the only viable way out. Which, of course, dovetails into the theory that, yeah, we're just bleeding the American military infrastructure of equipment and armaments dry in Ukraine so that when a war is launched against China by the United States, or vice versa, because there'll probably be some Gulf of Tonkin incident in the South China Sea that becomes the casus belli for war between the U.S. and China, that when that kicks off, we will have depleted our warehouses, our stockpiles of all the things we need to perpetrate that war, and potentially that war is going to be fought by a bunch of dudes in dresses trying to shit in litter boxes, worrying about which one of the 87 genders they feel like today. Or maybe we go over there and kick a bunch of ass. I think that remains to be seen. Quote, China will neither watch the fire from the other side nor add fuel to the fire, let alone take advantage of the opportunity to make profits. That's a direct poke at the United States, Xi said, as quoted by the Global Times. The Chinese president urged all sides to remain calm and restrained when dealing with the possibility of conflict spiraling into a larger confrontation, says the same guy who's flying daily sorties over Taiwan and just traipsing his navy all throughout the South China Sea. But over here in Ukraine, we got to remain calm and restrained. No one wins a nuclear war, he said. That's a fair assessment. Sounds very grounded, very reasonable, Mr. Xi. The guy who presses the buttons first tends to have, or at least we believe, since we've been wargaming this for the last 70 years, seems to be that when we wargame that out, the guy who presses the buttons first wins. Xi promised to dispatch a special envoy to Ukraine and other countries to conduct in-depth communication regarding a resolution of the conflict. In February, Beijing unveiled a 12-point roadmap for peace between Moscow and Kiev, expressing willingness to take part in mediating an end to the hostilities. China, unlike many Western nations, has refused to condemn Russia, its strategic partner, and to impose sanctions on Moscow. We're all aware of that. If anything, China and Russia have just grown closer together. BRICS, anybody? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, and 27 other nations now? Xi traveled to Moscow last month, where he met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The leaders vowed to work to increase trade in other areas of cooperation. Xi said that ties between the two countries, quote, have acquired critical importance for the global landscape and the future of humanity, end quote, according to the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Now, also, according to demographers, the demographies of both Russia and China suck. they could potentially run out of people within a generation, possibly two. War is a game of resources at its most basic level, and China and Russia require certain resources, not necessarily to feed and protect and provide for their people from an altruistic standpoint, but to feed and protect and provide for their people to maintain their control of the power base that they have in those nations so they can further their own goals of fleecing their own people and consolidating their own power and their own financial resources, etc., etc., etc. It's always the little guy that fights the war, right? It's not Xi Jinping's family. It's not Putin's family. It's not Zelensky's family. It's not Biden's family. Biden's family's too busy, doing blow and banging hookers. It's always the little guy. It's us that gets drafted. It's us that gets sent over there to bleed and die for your country. But maybe my country has done some shady shit to get us into this point in the first place, like arming and training the Ukrainians, who might be our next enemy. Like, I don't know, being, preferred nation status. Yeah, is that what it's called? Preferred nation status with China for the last 40 years, sending trillions of dollars in revenue to China so they can build out their military base to fight us with for the last 40 years or so. That sounds pretty stupid to me. I love my country. I love my family more. Going over there and fighting a war in Ukraine so that the big guy can get more of another 10% of whatever happens next over there for the big guy. No thanks. I'm not going to bleed and die for Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. or Xi or Zelensky or Putin or anybody else at this point. It's a hot mess. And I think, honestly, more and more people are seeing through the bullshit and are seeing the hot mess. So, recap. Stack food. If everybody else is preparing for war, you probably should too. Beans, bullets, and Band-Aids, right? The three major food groups of preparedness. That does it for the brief for today. If you're one of those people that jumps off when it's time to talk about how to support the show, this is your polite cue to beat feet, skedaddle, get out of here, have a blessed day. Shalom. For everybody else, again, please, if you've been unsubscribed, please resubscribe. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. If you've been around for a while, share the show with somebody you love. Links to everything I'm about to discuss in the description down below, so check the description. On Patreon this morning, talked about chest rig philosophy of use. Where is it? Talking about this chest rig right here. The saw rig from Sojourn Gear, my brother Cody. I've been putting this thing through its paces. I like it a lot. I'm giving it away to one of y'all on Patreon. So we're talking about that this morning on Patreon. Why you need a chest rig. When you take chest rig versus armor. What to look for in a chest rig. The functionality. Blah, 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 blah. Also, a little bit of range time. That's on Patreon because I don't shoot guns on YouTube anymore because the YouTube algorithmic hates my freaking guts and I'm not trying to give them any more ammunition to wipe me off the face of the earth with. So that's on Patreon. RefugeMedical.com. We talked about the origin kits. I showed you this one in the Western and all of the contents that are in it. This is the Highland version here. It's more tan. These are the origin first aid kits. Link in the description. We also have SOBs, small to back kit right here. War belt, plate carrier, chest rig, headrest compatible. Comes with a soft T or a cat tourniquet, both of which are Committee on TCCC recommended windlass tourniquets with tens of thousands of reps and sets during the GWAT. So real tourniquets, not fake or make-believe tourniquets. Pop this open, got the inner pouch, pull the inner pouch out. Now I got an IFAK in my hand. Everything inside of here. I got my pressure bandage, my combat gauze, my wound packing gauze, my gloves, my chest seals, my nasal pharyngeal airway, my Sharpie, etc., etc. And this weighs as much as one loaded AR magazine. So if you're one of those people that's all kitted out for World War III and you have a way to make holes, but you don't have a way to plug holes, I would submit to you, kind sir or madam, you got your priorities all jacked up and you need to get a first aid kit to go with all your other multicam black cool guy gear. the ARC Advanced Rip-Away Kit right here. Another similar to the SOB, but even more capability. This will work 1 to 2 casualties. Again, tourniquet on the bottom. Pop this little Fast-Tech buckle right here. You can mount this to your headrest in your vehicle or any other Molly or Pal's webbing field, like so. And then you pull this off. Got the red handle tucked in the back, like so. You pull this off. So if this is your individual first aid kit on your chest rig, like that one right there, I can pop this off and take it out where I need it, where I can get at it, or I can rip this off the headrest in my vehicle. Pop that open. You've got your internal pouches all organized, good to go, chest seals and combat gauze and wound packing gauze and airways and pressure bandages and all of that inside of here in a super neat little package. Designed by a law enforcement officer who's a brother of mine who's currently in Ukraine training TCCC as we speak. So he knows a thing or two. Now lastly, the bare minimum. All these are in stock, by the way. You can go get them at the store right now. This is the bare minimum. It's like the bare fac, just smaller. Still has a massive amount of trauma capability. See the size difference between the two? So you've got your tourniquet, your pressure bandage, your chest seals, your airway, burn tech dressing, etc., all inside of here. Plus, you've also got a lot of boo-boo stuff. Pull it open, grab the red handle, pull the inner out of the outer, pop it open, boom. Pressure bandage, wound packing gauze, Kerlix, gloves, tape. In the back here, we've got our, you also got Quick Clot right here. In the back here, you've got chest seals, burn tech dressing, etc. And then down here in the bottom, in the bare minimum, we've got, let me show you, 2x2, 4x4, and 5x9 gauze pads in a gauze module. Band-aids. So many of y'all are like, Bear, I get it, I've got a tourniquet, but what about when Susie falls off the bike? Band-aids, knuckle bandages, finger bandages, standard band-aids, good to go. And then you've got all your little topical ointments and BZK wipes and triple antibiotic and all that in a little pouch here. And then you've also got steri strips for wound closure, small and large steri strips if you have a major or a minor laceration. A lot of capability in the bare minimum 2.0. It's like the bare fac and the boo boo kit had a love child, and that's where you get the bare minimum 2.0. Now all this stuff is made in America. All of it's guaranteed forever. All of it is HSA and FSA eligible. All of it, if you use it to save a life, I will replace it no cost to you. And yeah, all of it 5-star rated at our website. Go check that out. Read other people's reviews. See what other people, actual end users, had to say about our equipment. This stuff is on 4 continents with all branches of the U.S. Armed Forces electively and thousands of law enforcement officers here in the States and thousands, if not tens of thousands of civilians here in the United States as well. RefugeMedical.com. Your promo code is BearNation for free shipping on everything in the store. RefugeTraining.com. We have some class availability in Boise, Idaho, and Tell City, Indiana. So if you need to come to class and learn the fine art of how to not die, I would strongly encourage you to go to RefugeTraining.com and pick a class that's nearest to you and sign up for class. If you are on Patreon, I will be providing the link to the next Oklahoma class, which I will be at this afternoon. So keep an eye out for that. That one will sell out about that fast. So, early bird gets the worm, that kind of thing. RefugeTraining.com. Boise, Idaho, Tell City, Indiana, Oklahoma class coming this afternoon. If it doesn't sell out today, tomorrow on Patreon, I will talk about it on Friday here on YouTube. Another perk of the $5 per month on Patreon is you get first access to all the cool stuff that we're doing. Like, for example, these Origin kits were available 24 hours earlier on Patreon than they were on YouTube and everywhere else. Then before they were even available to Origin's customers. So it's, $5 a month for a prepper consultancy. plus all of the exclusive content, plus all the exclusive opportunities to plug in and engage, plus Men's Group Monday, Women's Group Wednesday, plus the Saturday Zoom calls for fellowship, plus. Lastly, grindstoneministries.com. Thank you to every one of you who supports Grindstone Ministries. Please stay tuned for details on the Whiskey with Bear fundraiser that we'll be doing to raise money for Caleb House, and also for the Refuge Ruckus. The dates for the Refuge Ruckus are August 18th through 20th, 2023 in Fort Smith, Arkansas. We are going to ruck to raise money to build Caleb House, which is our restoration facility for juvenile human trafficking survivors. More details on that coming. You should go to grindstoneministries.com, sign up for the email blast, because all the details will go out there via the email blast. And if you want to donate, if you want to just donate right now, just give some money to some people who are out there doing the things to rescue abused children who have been serially raped from assholes, and to restore them for the remainder of their life. That's what Caleb House does. grindstoneministries.com, click the donate button. Of course, we've got all of our swag in the links as well. Grindstone Ministries, Caleb House hoodies, long sleeves t-shirts, our brother Saw's Facts Not Feelings shirt, our brother Rex's shirt, Sanctified Supply Co., who ties to Grindstone Ministries. They make this Shema hat. They make a bunch of other stuff. So check out all my brothers and sisters. Thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for being here. Thank you to every one of you who sticks around. We have the absolute best audience on the face of the earth. I love y'all. I couldn't do this without y'all, and I hope you have an awesome day. Bless y'all. Shalom.